Welcome to the Public Square. I'm Alan C. Duncan with Dave Zanotti, Melanie Elsey, Rob Walgate, and Dr. Jeff Sanders, talking about a very important ballot fight coming to the Midwest this fall. But first, we're going to begin by talking about some accurate historical war films, in particular one favorite. Here's Dr. Jeff Sanders getting us started.
You know, I watch videos of people who make it their life's calling to analyze historical war films for accuracy. And there's a whole bunch of them that are just terrible. Some of the top ones would be Waterloo, made in 1970. Rod Steiger is Napoleon. They say, if you want to see what Waterloo looked like, you watch that film. A Bridge Too Far, the story of Operation Market Garden in World War II, a fiasco for the Allies. Excellent film, historically accurate. And then right up there is the movie Gettysburg.
No kidding.
Yes. And also Gods and Generals, which is the prequel,
Right.
you know. But they say, if you want to get an overview, now you got to sit through it for 3 hours, of what Gettysburg...
3:30 on the director's cut.
Yes, okay, right.
So you've seen that before? Is that what you're saying?
I've watched those too. And I was like, why did they take that scene out? That's so important. You know, like when General Ewell doesn't take Culp's Hill on the first day, he should have done that. You know, you're thinking, why did they take that scene out? But anyway, that movie Gettysburg is pretty much right on the money in terms of the strategies that were used. You'll see it in the film. The uniforms. I'm a Civil War reenactor, and I keep looking for something wrong, like a button that's wrong or something.
I knew you were going to say buttons.
Or an insignia, or some guy's got a wristwatch or something like that. No, there's nothing like that in the film, and they really nail the characters also.
And I know that it was done at the park, but at the national park, but it was also done off the national park as well, and they kept the integrity of the terrain, so you really couldn't tell.
Now, I wouldn't use Martin Sheen as Robert E. Lee. I think that was a bad call.
Other people
Robert
have really
Duvall
praised his work.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm a Robert Duvall fan.
Okay.
He did a much better Lee, in my opinion.
But I will tell you right now, it was Jeff Daniels' finest role of his entire career.
Exactly.
People, when I tell them that Jeff Daniels played Joshua Chamberlain, people who have seen the movie say, that was Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, I know.
He so transformed his character into Chamberlain. It was amazing. Yeah. Absolutely amazing.
So not Dumb and Dumber. That's not his finest work.
Honestly, it is the antithesis.
That's called range, I suppose.
At every level.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a moment in the film. You know what I'm going to talk about. There is a moment, and I know it didn't happen because these kinds of films do not get the critical acclaim of the Academy.
Right.
I get that.
Yeah.
But there is a moment in that film where, in one word, Jeff Daniels should have been nominated for an Academy Award in his depiction at Little Round Top. That's when he utters the call to charge.
Yep.
In that one word, every single hair on your body stands up. And you almost feel like you literally have to stand up.
I have watched little boys, young men, 9, 10 years old. They've never seen this scene before. And I've shown it to them on my phone. And the same thing happens. They're transfixed.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, did this really happen?
It really truly happened
Just like
and
that.
was witnessed. And that's why he is a recipient of the Medal of Honor.
That's right.
And so true. So we've taken a dangerous track here, because anytime you attempt to draw moral or historical equivalencies to something in the current era, you leave yourself wide open, or in Gettysburg terms, you expose a flank whereby someone can attack you on the role of comparisons. We recognize that we're doing that. We also recognize that talking about anything in regards to the Civil War and then getting into a conversation of human rights is also, in this day and age, a very appropriate, timely, and extremely controversial conversation. But I want to go back to something that Dr. Allen said, or at least I took notes. Melanie's got the best notes. She has the best handwriting. We're all sitting here taking notes when Dr. Allen was talking to us about what's going on in Ohio and this particular amendment. And one of the things that he made crystal clear is that this amendment is a process to basically reinvent our humanity. It's a fundamental reconstruction of the reality equation of does it mean to be human. Now, he said some other things that it reconstructs as well, but the first thing he talked about was that one of the first things he talked about was that this is an attempt to recreate what it means to be human. And that by creating the concept of a right to reproductive decisions, then by not putting any age on it, and then by not defining it, by putting 5 sort of things that it might mean, including abortion, but not limited to, that we're literally taking, it's like back in the period where art was considered throwing paint on a wall. Mm-hmm. This is literally throwing paint on the wall and calling it, ta-da, this is you.
Not well, I guess to mix metaphors, is it also like just a blank check or a blank space in the Constitution that can be filled?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the most vague, open-ended language that would be, I dare say, in any state constitution across the country. It's limitless.
It puts constraints beyond measure on the legislative branch.
Oh, yes, it kind of shuts them out of the process, which means the people are shut out.
On these issues, there is no legislative voice. Yeah. There's no voice for those who elect people to represent them to set policy. It isn't going to be possible.
But once again, we have to dive into the language and deconstruct it and talk about it.
Exactly.
Because it doesn't fit in a 30-second commercial well to play on emotion like the other side tries to play when they mislead in their attempt to create this right on paper.
So if you want the copy of the language and the notes marked up that we've spoken about on the public square and in Dr. Allen's conversation with us, just visit us at aproundtable.org or thepublicsquare.com, and you can have this language and you can copy it. You can put it on the wall. You can throw paint on it. You can do anything you want and send it to all your friends. It's critical to get this language.
You talked about the director's cut. That's like the teacher's cut, the teacher's version of the language, because that language you'll get to see is all marked up by all of us.
Yeah.
In highlighting the flaws and exposing it for what it really means.
So we've done that, and this is going to be helpful. I honestly see this piece, because it's written up and we've got it on different colors. It's a part of our monthly update. You can get the monthly update and get it as well. That monthly update has on a single piece of paper, folded in half. We have everything you need on this to talk to anyone you want to talk to anywhere, from a Supreme Court justice to a person that lives next door. You can talk to everyone about it and give them all the information. And it's sufficient to make a decision. Here's what I wrote recently. This is like being in a high school debate team. You know, there were some debate teams you just knew no matter what the subject was, you didn't stand a chance. You just knew. Yeah. All right. So this is like high school debate team. We can win this debate on the fallacious, horrific, absurd nature of this proposal and why it should not become law. We can win this debate with one arm tied behind our back and an eye patch on.
All day long.
All day long. But guess what? That may mean nothing. Because this is an off election year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People aren't paying attention.
So, Rob, what kind of numbers in Ohio do you think it will take to see this horrific proposal defeated?
Well, in November of 2023 in Ohio, I don't anticipate 4 million people turning out to vote.
Tops
would turn out to vote.
Ohio's got a population of 11 million, about 8.5 million adults.
But
8 million adults.
But they wouldn't turn out in November, not all of them, because voting starts back in October.
Oh, it's starting in the middle of October.
Yeah, it's 30 days out.
Yeah, so it starts and then ends in November.
Yeah, so you're looking at roughly, I mean, you could have anywhere in an off election year from 22% to 44% of registered voters turn out. They may get 50% on this issue because it'll be talked about so much.
That's intentional, right? I mean, they're doing that on purpose, or can we not judge that?
The off year?
Yeah, that they're putting it in an off.
Oh, that's categorically. Yeah. It's totally strategic. Yeah, they had the choice to put it anywhere they wanted to, and there was the fact their troops were split. A lot of their troops wanted to put this in 2024 to impact the Senate election, but what they figured out was by putting this amendment in Ohio in 2023, it would create, if they could win this, It would create so much energy and momentum around the
Springboard.
state. It would be a springboard for huge financing gains and would enable them to leverage this into the Ohio Senate race in 2024, maybe even flip Ohio on the presidential race, but certainly carry this around the nation and say, this is why this is the defining issue. This is such a huge strategic plan that they've got on this. And we've got this validated, by the way. We're not making this up. We're not watching some cable news company and then telling you what they said. We have people on the ground. We have emails. We have letters. We know what they're up to.
And they're not I haven't heard them encourage people to read the actual language.
Well, there's a tell.
Well,
Is it, maybe I missed it.
Now,
I could have missed it.
Now, I will tell you what they're going to do. When this piece that we've written, and we've made it intentionally like as if you presented this as a high school paper and the teacher wrote all over it. And that what we did is we all wrote on it. We wrote on it in different colors. We put all these thoughts out there. They have been affirmed by the preeminent political philosopher in America, Dr. William B. Allen, who happens to sit on our board of trustees, and he would have told us if there was something in there that we messed up on. He thought we did a pretty good job on it. If you listen to that recent broadcast, he'll tell you that. But I do expect them to take that piece. They have one or two choices. They've either got to pretend it doesn't exist, which is what their consultants are going to tell them to do most likely. But some of their folks don't play by the rules, even their own rules. They'll attack that piece, which is what we hope and pray for. We hope and pray that they attack that piece. Because if the debate is on the actual words and not their fantasy illusions, they're going to lose, period. Because we talked to people who are pro-abortion and said we could never vote for this. This is just dumb. So the language is the problem, and that's the whole case. But now, here's my haunting. It's an off election year. So what? They're going to spend $70 million trying to get their people out. Will the pro-life community show up and vote?
We will be right back for more on The Public Square.
Every day, people ask, where can we hear more of the music played on the public square? Great news is, you can find many of our favorite artists at Hymns on the Square. The music is beautiful and given to the world as a gift of hope. It's waiting for you at Hymns on the Square. Just log on to thepublicsquare.com and walk on over to Hymns on the Square.
We're back around the table at the Public Square. Alan, Rob, Melanie, Jeff, and Dave talking about perhaps the most critical issue of our lives coming to the Ohio ballot this fall. Dave, what concerns do you have?
My haunting is, will pro-life voters, or even voters who just want a decent constitution, don't want trash in their constitution, will they stop arguing, get up, pull a ballot, an early ballot, go vote early, or go vote on election day? Because to me, voting for most people is like having to make an appointment at the dentist's office. It's an inconvenience, and I don't have time. I don't like. Come on, tell me I don't have to go this year.
I pray they will, and I pray they're intentional about it and reading the language and sharing it with others and talking to people about it. In this country, we spend more time on fantasy football drafts and studying for them than we do on voting for candidates.
Ironically, this will be right
issues.
about the time when the fantasy football drafts are all being done. Yeah.
I think it's important to keep in mind that people don't think until it's too late sometimes, oh, I got married. My registration isn't current. Oh,
Ooh, I didn't
I
think
have
of
an
that.
I have a son or daughter.
We got to fix.
I have a son or daughter who just turned 18. They're not registered yet. In Ohio, you can register to vote when you're 17 if you will be 18 by the general election. And the conversations that we have to have with our family and friends, we don't have the $70 million, but we have relationships. Family to family, friend to friend.
Don't you just want to hug her when she says stuff like that?
Those
Golly.
conversations have to happen before the first week of October.
They certainly do.
Because you might have family or friends that go early vote, and then they say, oh, I wish you had talked to me before I voted. I already voted.
Yeah, and there's a lot of discussion that's gone around about what's happened in other states, and I don't think that you can always look at other states because the language isn't similar and the demographics aren't similar and the people that brought it to the ballot aren't similar. Whether we talk about Kansas or Michigan,
that's
or
different.
that's totally different.
The offense, defense. This is a game where, forgive me for using the word game. This is a strategy where the pro-aborts are on the offense. They have said, this is what we want. They put it up on the wall and said, this is our big plan, not just for Ohio, but for the whole nation. This is how we're going to change the world. They're on the offense.
And look at what they're going to do in New York in 2024.
It's even worse.
We've talked about that language on here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that language is even worse.
Well, I was just going to interject. We were talking about people getting ready and registered to vote. I had a conversation recently with dear family friends of Joanna and I, and they're not people that we typically talk a lot of politics with. And they were asking me, they know where I work, they were asking me about how they should register, what they should do. They were kind of thinking more presidential coming up. And I said, hang on, wait, let's look at this first. And so I think that's an opportunity. If people are thinking about the presidential, let's pause and roll it back and say, hey, this is coming first.
And quickly.
Yes.
Because in an off election year, if someone comes to the polls that wouldn't normally do it, it kind of almost counts for two.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. But again, this is the haunting I have in the middle of the night. This is where my prayers, dear God, please awaken people to understand that this is a very dangerous situation that we're in.
If you're talking to family and friends in small groups, I would also I'm a former pastor, so I would strongly encourage you to talk to your pastor and alert him to the danger of the hour about this, so that he can. This is completely legal. The IRS will not harm the church or the pastor or anybody, so that he can talk about it from the pulpit.
Yeah.
And in your small group Bible studies or your Sunday school class, whatever.
Hand out the marked up copy that we've
The
prepared
language.
for people.
Hand out the language.
Energize your people now.
Put it up on the screen.
Yes.
And, Jeff, it's doubly important for people to remember that because this is a ballot issue, state and federal laws do not prohibit a pastor,
Right.
the board of elders, a deacon standing up and saying, we as a denomination, as a congregation, categorically reject this amendment. Now, of course, the other side is going to say this is about reproductive freedom, but you notice that that's not the right that they wrote into the language. They didn't write the right to abortion. They didn't write the right to reproductive freedom. They wrote the right to reproductive decisions, and then listed 5 things that sound like that, but said that that's not all. It's not limited to that. They wrote the language. This is not primarily about abortion. It's not about reproductive freedom. It's not about a woman's right to choose. This is about an entire reconstruction of how this debate will go forward forever, and it silences the legislative process, in essence, cuts the people out of it.
So we're telling people to read the language. Let's say they listen to us, they go read the language, and they're pro-life. And they see in here, oh, there is a fetal viability clause in here, or an exemption or an exception in here. And they say, oh, that looks good. How do we address that?
Because that's a hat tip.
That's a what?
It's a hat tip. I'm just
Tip
pretending.
of the hat.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're pretending that fetal viability is a piece that can be defended. But in that language, it's subjective to the judgment of the woman's doctor or abortionist.
Attending physician who most likely in that moment is an abortionist.
Interesting. So, yeah, because people might read that and see doctor and say, oh, well, that's good. It's a woman and her doctor are making a decision together.
But you're saying this
could be an
woman
abortionist.
and her abortionist.
Because they'd be classified as doctors as well.
They have to be.
They would have to be.
They have to be. Yes.
In the state of Ohio.
But now there's so many other pieces of this language that you can jump off a bridge on in this regard, because you look at fetal viability, it says it may be prohibited based on fetal viability, but it doesn't say it will be, or when viability is defined. It is right. That's a maybe, not a shall be prohibited.
Also, may versus shall.
Right, which means that it's presumed to not be prohibited unless the abortionist says, "Hey, I got an idea." All right, this is one of those things where we've got the language so set up with everything. You've got every parachute, trap door, weasel word set up into this thing, and it is not even remotely honest. Now, the most significant thing is, how do you define the right to reproductive decisions? We've never seen that before.
It's not defined in the ballot initiative.
So when they're marching in the street saying this is about you're taking the right of reproductive freedom away, say, no, I'm not even sure the right of reproductive freedom's in there.
Well, and the interesting thing to me, and we've talked about this before, is they list 5 things, 4 of which are not contested at all in the state
in
of
law
Ohio.
right now in the state. Don't
No.
need any constitutional protection.
Right.
It's like public relations terms. Oh, and then number 5 is abortion. Oh, now we're talking. Look, if we expect the debate on abortion. Roe versus Wade is down. Every state's got to have their own conversations about it. The question is, how do you go to the front of the line and say, it's like someone walking up to the class and say, this is now reality. 1 + 1 = 3. No questions permitted.
It may equal 3.
or shall.
Or shall.
In the opinion of the doctor, right, or the teacher. I mean, this is a pure. I mean, you talk about an unadulterated power grab. And this is why we wanted to talk with Dr. Allen, because to put this in the context of the Declaration, the Constitution, and the concept of rights in America at all. But again, okay, I get it. Look, we're winning the debate with our eye patch on and one arm tied behind our back. But who's going to go vote? Who will go vote? And you know what it takes to get people to go vote? You got to go ask them.
Yep.
Yeah.
You got to go door to door. You got to
motivate 'em.
ask them. You got to ask them, please. You got to put bumper stickers on your car, yard signs in your yard, whatever it's got to be. Go on social media. You got to ask them. And I'll tell you, there has never been anything in 43 years that we have been more concerned about than this, that people will show up. And God knows in Ohio, since 2009 and before, in off election years, people don't show up. So to win this will take a miracle.
I was talking to someone over the weekend, and they said, why do you think with this amendment, Planned Parenthood had the attitude of go big or go home? Why do you think in Ohio they came so over the top? Why didn't they try a very narrowly defined exception instead of putting some language that was vague and open-ended?
Why? Go big or go home.
Yes, that's what I told them. I said, well, they want it all.
Yeah,
They want it all.
They
They're
want
not
it all,
happy.
and they want it all now.
Now, they're not happy with an incremental move. They're
No.
not happy with saying, we'll take a little bit. They're saying, we want, because they believe in the Roe philosophy. They don't agree with the Dobbs decision, and they say they want this in all 50 states.
Well, more than what Roe provided over time. Roe provided some limitations over time. They want no limitations. This is up throughout all 9 months.
And look, the way this language is written, forgive me, everyone, for saying it. When you say it's about through all 9 months, you literally are talking partial birth and live birth abortions. This language would permit that. And here's the thing. It's impossible. The legislature won't stand. Guess what?
Legislature's cut out of it. Yeah. Once it's a constitutional
right.
amendment, the legislation has no part of this. They can't touch
The state
it.
shall not prohibit. It
Okay.
cuts the
Read that whole
legislature out.
sentence. Listen to this one. The state shall
The
not
state
prohibit.
shall not directly or indirectly burden, penalize, prohibit, interfere with, or discriminate against the individual's voluntary exercise.
All right, and keep reading now about, where's the word entity?
It can't even burden, penalize, prohibit, or interfere with the person or entity that assists the individual exercising this right.
This right, the right to reproductive decisions. So if you walk in front of an abortion clinic and stop and pray, you're breaking the Constitution. You're interfering with an entity
It's
named
not even
Planned
requiring
Parenthood.
that the abortionist be a doctor. A state could come in and allow anybody to do an abortion because it says person or entity that assists the person exercising this right.
But look, I'm going to look past the procedure and look to the entire conversation. You literally losing your civil rights to object to this. If you go to a school board meeting and say, I don't want that taught, you could be arrested because you're violating the Constitution.
So anybody in Ohio who's been praying for Roe versus Wade to end,
Right.
it's over. You're saying we could lose even harder than that. We've prayed for 50 years,
Exponentially.
and it's about to get worse if you don't go out and vote against
And
this.
then here's the big thing. Okay, this is where this thing, and again, we're sorry, it's here comes the eye patch and the arm tied behind my back. We're going to win the debate one more time. This will not stand. If it passes, it can't stand in one state alone.
Yeah.
because eventually someone will sue for equal protection under the law in the federal court system, and this entire thing will be driven straight back to the Supreme Court when the time is right, because you can't have one right in one state that's a civil human right and not have it in another state. That will be contested, and they'll drive this right up the line again when they get the court that they want. This is a total strategic plan on their part, which means if you can do anything to help Ohio, would you pray? And then would you talk to everyone that you know who has any influence whatsoever in that state, that they would rally their friends, pick them up, take them to vote, help them get an early ballot, and explain to them how that process works. Do whatever is legally permissible to encourage people to vote.
Yes. Thank you, Dave. Vote, vote, vote. Now, if you'd like to share this broadcast with a friend, find out where they like to listen to audio programs and let them know that this episode is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Spotify, YouTube, and our own mobile app. Look for The Lamppost, and we'll see you next time on The Public Square. Thanks for listening.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.